Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Stack Overflow podcast, a place to talk all things software and technology. I hope you have printed out your code and are ready to send it to us, express mail, because we will be reviewing it this week to see if you are a good listener of this show or not, if we want to keep you around. No, I joke. I am Ben Popper. I am the director of content here at Stack Overflow, along with my wonderful co-hosts, Cassidy Williams and Matt Kiernander. How's it going, y'all?
Hello.
So the news we cannot avoid is that Cassidy, first of all, is not, no thank you. Elon Musk, one of the world's richest folks, bought Twitter, took it private. And I don't want to comment too much directly on him or on the company. That's not what we do on the show. But I think from a software development perspective, the most interesting nugget, which came from a former colleague of mine, Casey Newton at the Verge and Platformer, was a call went out for all developers to print out their code and that it was to be brought to Mr. Musk for review so he could decide who was an ace programmer and who was not. Then another email went out saying, oops, that's a big safety no-no. Tear up all that code. We'll be coming around and inspecting on your machine. But Cassidy, Matt, like realistically, what could one person who's not, a genius as he may be, not an expert in many disciplines, know about somebody's work ethic or capabilities from looking at a printout of their last week of code?
I'm very curious to see how all of these things will unfold, particularly on the engineering side, because so many people are talking about layoffs. Like now it's just become a meme on Twitter itself, where it's just like, well, if anybody knows of roles, I was the person who made it so that way your DMs are impossible to search through and stuff like that.
I honestly, I dislike that trend of kind of memeing on layoffs and stuff that's really quite impacting. I think it's quite distasteful, to be honest. But
right.
The whole reviewing last week's code, like I think programming is very much kind of like writing. Like you kind of need context and to understand what's going on that went into a particular snippet. You can't just look at, like a day's worth of output. And
maybe last week's job was to fix a memory leak or to, make something less cluttered, not to write code, or, maybe, right, like your job is deprecating a feature, which happens and can be great for a company if it helps you focus, like I could see the one thing I could see is like, show me the last week's code or your most recent code, and it's like 6 months old. And it's like, oh, well, you haven't really been working. Like that I could see. Okay, like it's just a quick check. Like, are you actually here or not?
But even then, you need the lines of code for that. Look at, say, like, this is the Git log, or this is a high-level bullet point of the things, the set of bullet points of the things that I've done. Like, overall, it truly was just like, that made no sense. It made no sense. It was, gosh.
There's a lot of kind of, I think, knee-jerking to a lot of stuff that's been happening with the whole, because with software developers being very active on a platform like Twitter, it's something that they care about, they're kind of invested in. A lot of people, Ben and Cassidy, I know you've been on the platform for a long time, and you have a significant amount of people who choose to...
14 years.
Yeah, you had your anniversary the other day, right?
Anniversary, yikes, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who are software developers deeply interested in this, especially with what happens to the developers at Twitter and how that whole process. So like there's just a whole lot of chaos happening here that's very relevant to.
I think it's fair for us to have some opinions on stuff that works directly with developers, and like how would you review a developer in the abstract. Well, I don't want to comment on Elon or Twitter directly. That's not what this show is about. But and I also think, Matt, to your point, it's impossible for other software developers to look away. We all communicate and sort of watch Twitter as kind of what the news and what's trending. And so seeing, certain things, well, now people are being asked to work over the weekend to produce a new feature, and that's like going to be the culture now. That's a big shift. And the future failure of success, failure of success at Twitter, I think will be tied up in that. What kind of company is this? And, other people have said, I'm not going to work over the weekend. I'm not compromising in that way. So I think it's definitely interesting, and there's no looking away from it.
There have been some commentary pieces around in general, just because the economy is not great. There's no secret about that. But fundraising right now is difficult for most startups. Layoffs are happening all over the place, and people are saying that this will be a very interesting vignette and look into the fact that a lot of tech companies probably don't need as many employees as they do. They
Right.
could probably have a bit more of a lean machine, and a lot of
Right.
startups in general are just like, oh, well, when we get funding, we can hire this many people so that we could grow. And I think that more
Right.
companies now will be prioritizing sustainability. How much will they trim down the team? How much will they change the engineering culture in general? But also just like, how will they try to make it a more sustainable platform as a business in general?
On the note of sustainability as well, I do wonder how that's going to impact potential growth and output as well, whether or not they're going to match, like look at sustainability from an employee perspective, whether or not they're going to say,
Mm.
okay, we have to lean down, but you also have to reduce our growth expectations to match. Because anytime you speak to a company or senior leadership team, that is not something that they want to do either.
Yeah, Cassie, to your point, it's always fascinating to me to look at a company like Instagram or WhatsApp where they just found some incredible product market fit, and a lot of the marketing was done word of mouth essentially.
Yeah.
And I think Instagram had like 15 employees at the time it was sold for $1 billion, and WhatsApp had like 50. And so, it is possible to get to massive scale and to have a very slick product and to really meet the needs of users without even having 100 employees. And so it's kind of like, but what about all these other companies that now have 70, 80, 90,000? Like, what are all those people doing?
Yeah, I think there's so many different examples of companies like that, where even teams within companies, where a friend of mine used to work on Google Forms, and I don't know how big the team is at the time, but for a long time that team was less than 10 people managing all of Google Forms, and that's a pretty big piece of software that a lot of people use. And so yeah, I can see that being a very common trend that we start to see more and more.
That really puts into perspective some of the teams, I guess, that I've been on throughout my career, and looking back and saying, well, if there's 10 people who are working on a product that large like Forms, what what was the idea in scaling the teams that I was working on to that point for much smaller products as well?
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, because sometimes you just don't need them. And
Right.
I'm not saying this to be like, "Yes, make those slashes, Elon," or anything like that.
Not
Like,
what we're advocating.
I don't want
Yeah.
anybody to lose their jobs right now. I just think that there's going to
Right.
be a very interesting trend of smaller teams and just more steady growth rather than hyper growth.
Right. Right. I think that makes sense. All right. I wanted to touch on a few other items in the news. I just wanted to say this word because I thought it was so cool. GitHub shut down a potential threat, repojacking. Man, I just wanted to say
Oh.
repojacking. It sounds very cyberpunk. Sounds
Yeah.
like house music. Repojacking. It sounds like a good song.
Sounds like a good EDM mix.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds like a really good
Repojack.
EDM mix. Repojack. Basically, you are giving away a name and making sure you're changing another name in the repo, and somebody comes in and scoops up the old name, and then goes out and quietly pretends to be you. And I thought about this in the context of Twitter. Are there such thing as like a verified repo? Like, do they have like ways of saying yes, this really belongs to this person? Because like that's kind of what this is attempting to do, is use the name as the ploy to get you in.
No, is the very
Yeah,
quick answer. I do think
yeah,
that's something that's worth looking into, just because unfortunately harassment does happen on GitHub and stuff. And so people will like pretend to be someone else, or start spamming you and stuff, and there's not much you can do about it besides block and report and everything. And I could see with this whole concept of repo jacking and taking people's code,
yeah,
that could be something not great. And that's
yeah,
where I think
yeah.
a lot of times they've relied on the cynicism of developers who tend to look at the number of GitHub stars, how many forks does it have, da, da, da,
Right,
to kind of assess how legit a repo is.
right. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Like this new account probably wouldn't. Maybe though, there's like bots who can help you gin up stars, and like people kind of play that game and stuff like that. So, but I mean,
Yeah.
it seems like they have gotten on top of this before it became too big of a deal. So that's a good thing. All right, next item: investors have the hots for generative AI. I also have the hots for generative AI.
I do too.
Who doesn't? Cassidy, would you consider the company you work at now to be generative AI?
It is generative AI. I
Yeah.
have a particular amount of hots for generative AI myself, because
Yeah.
That is what my company does. But it's actually it's been really interesting because of this very funky climate that we're in. Like, now is the time to raise if you are in generative AI. Like, my company contended we were in like the generative AI index that the Scale VC company just released last week, and we were on an index that Sequoia released recently, and there's so much inbound, and it's very interesting to see, which I'm not trying to just like boast like we're amazing. I think it's truly just because investors really have the hots for it right now, and it's really interesting to see, like, could this be a cool gold rush? But what I think will be interesting is how to make it so that way it doesn't just produce spam. Because you both might have seen that Jasper AI recently raised like one of the largest Series A's ever. Like, I think their Series A was something like 125 million, and their valuation was over $1 billion for a Series A. That is wild, especially in this climate. Like, it's good for them. But there's already articles on the other side of it being just like, oh, just so you know, Google's deprioritizing the spammy articles that you're putting out just for SEO fluff and stuff. And so on our end, we're trying to figure out how do we generate high quality content that isn't spammy, because when you have an AI that is so good at generating anything, that can add a whole lot of noise, and you have to figure out how do you stick out amongst that.
Right. I think the other fascinating area for this for me is that it unlocks so much creativity. It can produce so much powerful and useful content, and it seems to be getting better at such an astonishing rate. But I'm sure your company is thinking about this, like the issues around like sort of copyright and like what generates what goes in to train the machine are very interesting. In your case, for Contenda, it's a little different because it's like
I was going to say
your customers are supplying the content for the
Right.
mid-journey types and stuff like that who now have like an enterprise account. In their terms of service, they explicitly say like, look, if you get sued, like we're not responsible. We're not claiming we have the copyright for this. You use it at your own risk. So really interesting to see what happens in that kind of both. It's interesting that VCs would be willing to invest in that. And I also want to see how, it develops and plays out and where the law ends up landing.
Yeah.
I do wonder if that's going to be, for the greater good type of thing that might happen later on down the line, where people kind of realize the benefit that all of these AI tools have on creativity and their own workflows. And everyone kind of just accepts, okay, so like my original artwork is going to be fed into this machine, which is going to, enable other creators to generate more stuff too. But then I'm also going to be able to benefit from that at the end of the day. So everyone might just decide, oh, this kind of sucks, and the copyright thing is a little bit of a gray area. But at the end of the day, it's benefiting everyone more than it harms. I don't know.
I think that's where, again, there's lots of companies in this space right now, and I don't think all those companies are going to end up being there at the end of the day, just because you have to find that exact point of how do you make this useful where general people are just like, wow, this is a pretty good thing, and this is a useful tool. Because so much of it is, it's just like, well, you're ripping off artists now. That's not cool. And so you don't want that to be a thing. And so how do you make this a tool that makes a human's job easier without being bad, for lack of a better word.
Right. Yeah. I would be interested in like a version where it's like it's only stuff that's way out of the Creative Commons. Like you can only reference artists that are from pre 1850 or whatever, because like there's no copyright that exists there. And if it's post, I want a license, and that artist is going to see a little bit of the revenue, whatever it may be. All right. Small news: Slack has typing info in threads. Typing info. What's typing info?
Oh, so like saying Cassidy is typing in a thread?
Exactly. Yeah. This is an article that just popped up today, and it was written by The Verge, and they were very positive about the benefits that it offered, because there's a lot for a media agency. There's a lot of collaboration there. Software developers, it's the same thing. Somebody posts a thread. It's hard differentiating who is actually typing within a thread versus who is actually doing it within the main channel and contributing to the main block. And so now that separates the two, so you can see who is writing out like a one-liner in a thread as opposed to kind of typing up a whole message to the entire channel, which might be important.
Right. That is nice. It's small, but it's like a quality of life improvement.
Yeah. It's like, thank you for doing that. It's something that is genuinely
I'll take
useful.
it.
Yeah.
Show me your code from last week. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I don't know if y'all know about this company, but I just wanted to bring them up. The browser company. They came onto my radar. Cassidy knows. Great. I'm excited because a friend of mine, Ellis Hamburger, who has the best Twitter handle of all time at Hamburger, left Snapchat to go work there. And they're all about building a sort of privacy respecting next-gen browser that isn't connected as much to the data collection and more about personalizing your user experience. I think they're kind of a pre-revenue thing, but interestingly today they hired somebody very deeply involved in the creation of Google Chrome, a little web browser you might have heard of. So Cassidy, tell me a little bit about what you've heard and what your thoughts are on browser company.
So honestly, I mostly keep track of them because I like their design and logos and stuff. They have cool hats.
I was just about to say their website is pretty immaculately designed. It's very pleasant to browse through.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure their technology is amazing, but I do really appreciate that. A lot of what their values and like what they're putting out there reminds me of our podcast that we had a long time ago. I don't actually remember when it was, with Alexander Obernower, who is doing a lot of research about the future of the personal operating system. It feels like they're doing that very similar type of work, but for the browser. And I'm all for it because everybody's been getting away with kind of harvesting data for so long. It's kind of nice to see people trying to move against that grain.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the complication to me is that browsers now are increasingly built into larger ecosystems that alleviate so much, that act as a second brain. We've talked about second brain a lot, right? So now I rely on my browser to sync from desktop to mobile and across multiple machines and remember all my passwords and have my favorite sites ready. And it's hard to give all that up, or like redo that or re-import that. At the same time, I completely agree that like, the distraction element of social media and the context switching and maybe even some of the ad tracking is not, none of that is stuff that I particularly want in a browser. So I like the alternatives. I feel trapped. I feel trapped by the convenience of the very powerful browsers because they're so good.
And they're designed to keep you in. Like I remember I was talking to someone that agreed where they were saying one of our biggest competitors is sleep actually, because if people are doing that, then they're not using our services. And so they have to figure out how do we design it so that you keep using us and not sleeping. And it just is so dystopian to say that out loud.
Just on the subject of being locked in as well, when it comes to mobile, especially like the Apple ecosystem, as far as I'm aware, a lot of the third-party browsers like Chrome and everything else, they all have to use kind of Safari underneath the hood. So I don't think I'm going to have to verify this, but I'm pretty sure that when you're building another browser with an iOS application, it's all using the same underlying technology. So I'm not sure how something like this would work in an Apple ecosystem sense. With Android, it might be very different. But yeah, it's there's going to be some hurdles, I think, that people are going to have to jump through to get this personal experience that's not ad driven.
I want to shout out actually both of you. Matt, you did a video with John Chant that got over 1,000 views on our YouTube, and Cassidy, you were in the video about job hopping that got over 1,000 views. And I know 1,000 views in a YouTube video is not great, but for Stack Overflow videos, it's we're reaching new milestones here. We're going from 50 to 100 to 500 to 1,000. So thank you to everybody who watched the videos and to the growing audience there that's checking our stuff out. We appreciate it.
Also, the comments on the John video as well were very, very sweet. So thank you for anybody who's listening who posted on there too.
Yes. I thought, we're small enough where people are still generally positive.
Yeah.
You have to stay in that sweet spot.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to get too big. All right. Thank you, as always, to Alessandro Suglia, awarded 2 days ago. Came on a Stack Overflow and got a lifeboat badge for helping to save a question with a negative score. Give it a great answer. Now it's got a positive score. How to get the string before dot and after /last, the last slash in Java. Alessandro has the answer for you, and I will share it in the show notes in case you've ever run into this problem. All right, everybody. I am Ben Popper. I am the director of content here at Stack Overflow. I am Ben Popper on Twitter. I will share my Mastodon username in the near future in case you want to find me there. But if you really want to get in touch and just chat with us or any of the hosts or suggest things, just hit us up, podcast@Stack Overflow, or leave us a review. Really helps.
I'm Cassidy Williams. You can find me at Cassidy, Cassidoo, on most things. I'm the CTO at Contenda, doing all that generative AI magic.
Oh, so hot right now. Generative AI, so hot.
I love the Zoolander reference. Thank you for that. It's been a while. I should watch that movie again. And I'm Matt Keenander. I'm a developer advocate here at Stack Overflow. You can find me online on the YouTube and Twitter for now, at Matt Kander, MattKander.
Very cool. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening, and we will talk to you soon.